anything more complicated than that. Oh, I got to push another one here. There. How's that?
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks again for coming on. I appreciate it. My first question for you is this, Jim. This is one thing that has stuck out to me in watching your stuff. And I don't know if, I'm sure it's occurred to you probably, but more than a lot of the other hunting shows out there that I see, people cry. I see people crying on your show after they shoot a moose or a caribou, or, you know, I know these are big animals and you're really off the grid. And I wonder if that's ever occurred to you, why it's so emotional for people when you're guiding them and what they're experiencing.
Oh, yeah, of course it is. The feeling that they get, and I mean, you try and analyze. I'm not inside their body, but all of us who are hunters and have been there, you're getting in touch with your ancestral soul. That's truly what it is. Now you can couch that slightly and say, well, someone may have saved for 20 years to be able to go on this once in a lifetime trip. Maybe it's somebody that, you know, those feelings that they have right then are so similar to what they felt when they were with their own father, mother, mentor on their first hunt. You know, maybe they're there because I had a fellow one time that he came up. His name was Steven. I won't say his last name. This was 30 years ago that I guided him, and he was a person that wasn't, you know, very likable in the camp. People disliked him. I mean, he was, you know, at the dinner table just grabbed people like literally off their plates. Like, you know, he's a big guy, and
Sure.
And when I took him out, you know, I found out that his wife had died. He was a professor, and his life just went downhill from there. And he lost control of his life. He became a truck driver and hated himself and just blamed himself. And he came to the hunt to get his bear, and then he was going to kill himself. You know, so when he the time I spent with him, you know, I started learning about him, and in the end, you know, he told me, you know, that it was the most significant event in his life, and that, you know, tears in his eyes, and that he was going to try and get his life back in order. And I got calls from him for years afterwards. So, you know, you never know to try and say this is what it is, but it truly, at the essence is people are in touch with their ancestral soul in that moment, and it's overwhelming. And whatever their contemporary reasons, effort they put in, it still boils down to that. They're getting in touch with something that's so ancient and innate in all of us. And I think that's what, you know, brings out the tears.
That's interesting that you say that. And I know, I mean, I want to talk about your museum and stuff like that, because I know it's been a passion of yours, but I've been doing a lot of writing to try to figure out why I took up hunting as an adult when my personal life kind of fell apart, and that, you know, how hunting replaced my traditional religious upbringing. And it's funny that you say that, because so much of what I wrote about ended up being about, I want to be in touch with the kind of things my ancestors did. Like, that's what I feel like I'm missing. And one thing that occurred to me is, you know, when my whatever generation, 2 or 3 generations ago, when my forebears, you know, left the farm and moved into the city and never had to butcher another animal, never had to kill another animal, they thought that they'd succeeded, right? Like, that was what was rewarded in the modern world. And now I come along and feel like that modern world's kind of let me down, and I'm trying to get back to something. So I'm guessing you find people, you have almost a ministry or kind of a pastoral type relationship with people that you're taking into the outback.
100%. The cathedral that we take them into is the wildlands, the forests, the nature, God, however you want to describe it, the great Manitou, the Mother Earth, however you want to describe it, the cathedral's there. It's all there for every single one of us, regardless of our religion or theological point of view. It's there. And when you walk into that, again, back to the ancestral soul, you are purified, you're cleansed. And the urbanization is a false prophet. The science as a religion, we have it all around us nowadays. People don't believe in anything, so they have to believe in science. And the only way they try and show penance. Let's buy carbon, offsets. They spend money and they, look, this is my penance. This is my tithe to their church, which is science. And as I said, it's a false prophet. There's no purity. There's no truth in the science. The truth you'll find when you get back into the wildlands and embrace what brought us to the table, or our antecedents, your forefathers, as you said. And when you walk out, they're truly open to be part of nature, not a voyeur in nature, because again, that's an urbanized, science-based view on what we should be doing out there. Is let's stand back and take pictures. We're above nature, we're voyeurs. But when you embrace the reality of nature, life begets death, begets life, begets death, and the continuity of the field to table lifestyle that goes back, depending on what you believe, thousands of years, or your faith, thousands of years, or millions. That's who we are. And you can urbanize. That's a sad generational statement on where society sits today, at least in our Western cultures and even around the world.
Yeah.
But there's still many people, make no mistake, there's many people that still live the field to table lifestyle in a much purer existence than we do in our concrete jungles. So anybody that's open, tolerant, willing to learn, not closed-minded, that walks in the wildlands, they feel the spirituality. You can't not feel it if you're part of it. If you're taking pictures of it and that's all you're doing, and you're justifying it as the science, and that's the only right. This in an ivory tower, you're not part of it. You're seeing it, but you're not part of it.
The reason I reached out to you is I think it was your post on Easter or around Easter, and I found it to be inclusive in that it wasn't. You were kind of writing in a way of saying you weren't discriminatory against one religion or for another religion. You were writing kind of like, this is a time for all of us to, spring is coming, and I was impressed by the breadth of your message, which I don't often see in some outdoor celebrity hunting type people. They kind of pick their path, and then it's always about that. So you must, because of your clientele, you must have a very diverse clientele. Plus, you're obviously in touch with native peoples who have a different spirituality than those of us, probably who grew up in Western religion. And I wonder, how do you kind of manage that with the people you're guiding, but also even in your own evolving understanding of spirituality and truth and our kind of place in creation?
It was Samuel Clemens. Mark Twain was his pen name. And I'm going to paraphrase, but he said, travel is the death of bigotry. And I believe ignorance, but I won't add that in. He's rolling over in his grave right now, looking down. You butchered what I was saying. But because I've traveled so much, I realized that there is no right and no wrong for most things. All of us know what's right and wrong inside. You don't murder your friend, the 10 Commandments. That's universal. in our world, which, you know, we think we're the universe. We're not. It's a very small planet, third from the sun, and one of a billion galaxies apparently. So
Yeah.
so you know, but in traveling, I've realized that, you know, I came in with subjective views on things, that this is right and this is wrong, because that's how I was brought up. And I realized over time that, well, these are smart people over here too, and they think this, but it's kind of counter to what I think, so I should fight them. But, you know, I realize that they're good people. They want the same things that we do here. We want our children to be healthy. We want them to have a roof over their heads and clean water, clothing, and we, you know, a luxury. We want them to have a education, you know, but they want the same things around the world. They're just like us, except their point of view is different. They dress differently. They certainly look differently, different colors. They eat different foods. They speak a different language, but ultimately they're the same as us. And I started to understand the true meaning of tolerance. And it's something that we need more of in this world. I realize now it's not a big place anymore. There's nowhere else we can go. We can't colonize somebody else. And if, you know, I mean, there's still people out there trying, but really 8 billion of us in this world, we need to start getting along. And that, you know, tolerance is going to become so vital in that. So when I'm speaking, I'm not ever judging. I don't judge, and I don't say my way is the right way and you're just wrong. And there's people out there right now that are listening to this going, well, that's just not true. They're wrong. You know, they're heathens, they're whatever.
Yeah.
And but for me personally, what I've seen is we all want the same things. There's bad people out there that, you know, the devil, you know, whatever, however you want to say it, they're possessed, they're, you know, they're evil, incarnate, but they're, you know, there's bad people, and it doesn't matter where you are, what color you are, what country, there's bad people. But the vast majority of people are good. And that means if they're good and they're, you know, they're not unintelligent, they're, you know, no, like I'm not smarter than them, then what's right? So that's where you get when I speak, I try and be inclusive, consensus. You know, we need to start getting along. You know, 100 years from now, I can't imagine this planet if we want to continue to, you know, not tolerate each other's point of views, and that goes for everything. Politics. I mean, look at how divisive it is right now.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It's
Absolutely.
You know, and if you don't cater to this side, you know, or weigh this side, then you're losing that vote, which makes you, you know, well, that's not really what you believe. You're just trying to get reelected instead of, you know, just tell the truth.
Yeah.
So all of this it comes down to tolerance. Tolerate this point of view, tolerate this point of view, and let's start working together. We have to for the good of this, you know, humanity.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying so much, and I mean, as a leader in this industry, I think it's incredible that you're saying it. But I know that, you know, the backlash. Even I had Randy Newberg on, and he said similar things. You know, his cathedral is the wilderness, and hunting is his religion, quote unquote. You know. And then immediately in the comments after he posted it, people were like, well, but Jesus is the only way and the Bible is the truth. And, you know, people have to like take to social media. So that, I mean, I wonder for you, how has technology changed the social media and everything, the access that people have to somebody like you? How has that changed your experience of being a guide and being a hunter and being a TV celebrity and stuff like that? Are there parts about that worry you about the advance of technology? I mean, I think you and I, you know, 8 billion people is a lot of people. And then suddenly when technology makes it so everybody's on all the time, I wonder how that's affected, you know, or made you think about the hunting endeavor.
You know, it hasn't, you know, it allows Well, let's put it this way. Social media is a double-edged sword. It can be used for horrible, terrible bullying. I mean, you just go down the list. But it also can be used for good. You said it, we're 8 billion of us, we're always on. Well, we have access today to just about all 8 billion people. You and I do right now.
I know.
We have to market it, and we have to somehow create something that reaches, goes viral. But the message that we, and our belief structure, we can now disseminate that feeling in a far greater effectiveness than we could in the past. You had to write a book. I mean, that's what you had to do. I've got a book in our library in our museum here by Plinius, 1507. He had to write a book. It's on vellum. I mean, he had to, but that was it. And then who could read it? Well, only the people that were educated at that time to read Latin, and would be able to afford a book that was handwritten all the way through it. With the social media, if a Da Vinci comes into our world, it won't be just in his little enclave and social, I guess, group that he hangs out in, but he can reach the world now. If another Jesus comes, if there is another coming, imagine, that person, that deity can reach everybody. So social media is not a bad thing. It's, again, how it's used or abused. And that does it frighten me? Not so much, because I do think in the end that people are inherently good. I believe that. In my experience around the world, there's the vast majority of people, like I said, want the same things: their children to be healthy, to be clothed, to have a roof over their head, to have food, and then education. I mean, that's what people want, the vast majority of us. And then there's bad people that don't want that. So I think that in the end, social media will be, like I say, imagine second coming, and the ability to reach everyone, not just the locality you're in. So I
would just be happy if just everyone listened to one of my episodes of my podcast, Jim. I don't even have to be Jesus.
Yeah. And therein lies a different problem, is that with 8 billion people, everybody, online, wired in,
half of them have podcasts.
Yeah. Your reach is, you become part of this monstrous, nebulous thing. And how does your message get out there? That's, I don't know, maybe, hopefully if there is another coming, there'll be someone really good at marketing, because that's what it's going to take. But I
get through the noise.
honestly believe, that the social media is not a bad thing. It just, we just have to become responsible in our use for it, the vast majority of us.
Let me ask you about the technology of the hunt then, because obviously you've seen it change dramatically over your career. And I wonder, when you're, with all the respect you have for these animals, I mean, I'm particularly taken by watching the moose hunts that you guide, or your own moose hunts. It's such, I've never hunted a moose. I've seen moose when I've been canoeing in the Boundary Waters. It seems, and I can see why it's so emotional for people. It's a very, let's call it that ancestral experience. But I wonder then, when new technologies come into the field, are you weighing the ethics of saying, of a piece of technology and the ethics of the fair chase and things like that? Like, how do you, as a professional guide and hunter, make those decisions? Like, no, I'm not going to fly a drone over to scout that area, even though I could, because I'm using human technology to give myself an advantage over this animal, or something like that. That stuff must occur to you, and you've seen so much change. So how do you manage that?
Well, ethics are a personal thing, and it's not for you or I to judge anybody else on their ethics. If they want to fly a drone and it's legal, it's not for me to judge that. I know what I feel is right, and flying a drone to look for an animal is not my thing.
Hmm.
I'm not judging someone else. Shooting at great distance, using the technology we have nowadays, they can shoot 1,000 yards. I mean, that's not my thing. It's not why I go out into the wildlands. Um, it's not. It's I don't need that to live my field to table lifestyle either. But I don't judge it. I mean,
Hmm.
that's if it's legal. Now if they make it illegal, then it changes.
Yeah.
Now you've broken a law. But who was it? Was it Aldo Leopold said that ethics are, or you do, or what you do when no one's around to watch,
Yeah.
even if there's, it's okay to do something. I mean, that's a personal thing. So
Yeah.
what's changed in the time, and it's been a long time. I mean, I got my first deer half a century ago, a
Mm.
little over half a century ago. So, I mean, I was out there with my dad and my uncles and jumped out of a truck and shot a white-tailed deer,
Mm.
running across the field. And was that ethical? I mean, I wouldn't do that now.
Hmm.
So, you know, I'm, I've gone, if anything, further back in time, when that wasn't available to jump out of a vehicle and take a shot. I mean, it was road hunting. Um, so, that part, for me, I think I was less ethical back then, regardless of technology. My gun was virtually the same.
Mm.
It's not any fancier or anything better. I have a rangefinder now, but I only use that uh, more out of curiosity for helping me judge distance. I'm curious, and I want to make sure I don't take a shot that's too far.
Right.
Something can look like it's 200 yards, but it's actually 450 yards.
Mm.
It helps me judge the animals as well. So there's technology that I've embraced. Trail cameras didn't exist back then, but I love my trail cameras. I've probably got 50 of them.
Mm.
To me, that's hunting. I get to be in 20 different stands at a all night long, and it's legal, and I get to see what comes in. So it's a form of hunting for me that I love. I have just as much fun capturing a deer on camera that way, a particular buck that I'm looking for, as I do actually going and getting the deer. I love it. I love to learn. It gives me more knowledge. I feel like I'm more connected to that animal. So I love trail cameras. Lighted nocks on bow and arrows. I mean, that didn't exist way back when. I think they're fabulous.
Mm.
I wrote a letter to Pope and Young a long time ago when they were adamantly against any technological advancements, and said, look, it's just more fun. And hunting is supposed to be a little about having fun. You can see the knot going through there, besides the fact that it helps locate the arrow and then determine where you hit the animal. It allows you to see the arrow better, to be able to determine where you hit the animal. So you become better at what we're supposed to be doing, which is taking animals humanely. So I love lighted nocks. Compound bows didn't exist back then, and I had my longbows. I started as a kid. I used to hunt all the time with a longbow, not a recurve, a straight longbow, and I love my compound bow. So there's technology. Did it make me any better hunter? I don't think it necessarily did, but it certainly allowed me to be a more ethical hunter, and from my point of view. And again, I'm not judging anybody else's ethics, but for me to use a longbow, a stick bow, and cedar arrow, and a point, a broadhead that I made, I think the idea, the romance is wonderful, but it shouldn't be me doing it because I'm just not good enough, and I know that. So
Mm.
for me, I mean, that's why I switched to muzzleloader. Rifle was too easy, bow and arrow was too hard. Muzzleloader was the perfect combo for me.
Mm.
But I was an archery hunter before that, and now I'm back to archery hunting because
Okay.
it's far less important for me on what I get nowadays. It's
Yeah.
I get my moose and my caribou every year, and that's plenty of meat for us. Maybe a deer.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't judge. I think some of the technological advancements are wonderful, and I don't judge anybody because they use more than I use. I think if it's illegal, then it's poaching, and that, that's where you have to draw the line. Then it's not unethical, it's illegal.
Yeah. I mean, I think you make a good point, and some of the advancements of technology make for probably less animal suffering, right? Because you have better accuracy, more opportunity to make a kill shot, which is obviously something people are, I think, very sensitive to in the modern world, which is, one of the things that social media begets is anti-hunting sentiment is strong. And I know you've spoken out against that. But I want to ask you about aging, if you're willing to talk about it, because one thing I appreciate about your social media is, you're just you're just honest. You're burnt. What were those sweet potato fries last week or something like that?
Yeah.
You're not, it's not, there's no spin. It's just you and your life. And I know, so you've been, it's public that you've had some health issues in the last year. Your wife's had some health issues in the last year. And I wonder, as somebody who's been so physically active for 50 years, and that's just been your life, how you are thinking spiritually about the aging process. And I mean, I've thought about it a ton since I turned 50, and all my friends, we talk about it all the time. Yeah. What does aging mean to you?
There's nobody gets a free pass on this. I mean, it is part of living. Dying is part of living. I mean, we're starting to die the instant we're born, really. And so I've never feared it. I've watched my parents, what they went through. They're both gone now. My dad 10 years ago, my mom 3 years ago. And I've seen my grandparents pass on, and the people that I've held as heroes, I've seen them pass on. So who is it? Just Jerry Springer. I heard on the way over here. Now, certainly not one of my heroes, but he produced 4,000 episodes. He was a social statement of that time period. Shock TV. He just passed on, 79. But everybody does, and I think I embrace it. I embrace it. My wife Louise is one of the most spiritual people I've ever met, and she says it's a privilege to get to this age. I'm 65. She's 66. And it's been a privilege. I mean, there's many people around the world. There's like 8% of the people ever live to that age that are born in this world today. It's a privilege. So every day is precious that we get. And I never take a single day for granted. Never have. Physically, I mean, I think it sucks. I mean, I was last year in July, my knee started going bad, and I've had it operated on before. I've a lot of miles on my body, and it was giving me such a headache. I mean, a knee ache. I couldn't sleep at night, so I got it operated on, and 10 days later played in our club championship for golf and came third. Right. So, I mean, I'm a good golfer. 4 handicap, 5 handicap, decent golfer. And then a week later, I started some kind of weird autoimmune, me. If I mean, heck, I was climbing mountains the day before. It's not a big deal. And I could keep up with the 20-year-olds. Maybe not, the Cam Haineses of the world, but I could certainly keep up with, mere mortals. And then suddenly it was taken away from me. I could not. I mean, to get out of a chair would take me 15 minutes. I didn't even know if I could get out of a couch. It was, I've never been in such pain until the doctors didn't diagnose it, but they fed me prednisone, which, thank you. I don't know what people used to do in the olden days, because I would have tolerated that for about a month and said, that's enough.
Wow.
It was too much pain. And but it was interesting. I mean, it's just, okay, that's my cards, and this is what it is. So I've been fighting that for 8 months now. I still can't golf. I can't
Hmm.
work the wrist to, take a swing. I can't lift, that's about it for my shoulder. Um,
Wow.
but I mean, what did I think? I was going to be immortal? And yeah, there's options. I see it all the time. People my age, getting testosterone shots, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. Who knows? Maybe I'll do that someday. Human growth hormones, the various drugs that they're taking, and they all turn the same heavy, jowls
Yes, I know.
and starches, and
Wow.
just looking, okay, I know what you're doing, and that's wonderful, and I guess good for them. But I kind of want to know this journey, and I mean, we eat as well as we can.
Yeah.
But I want to play this out. I know I'm not going to get out of it. No one is.
Right.
So let's see how you handle it, and do you handle it with dignity, and grace and respect, and understand that if we don't leave, what is that? Why do we need other generations coming up underneath us? We have to leave to give space, and we're not doing that good a job at it. There's 8 billion of us,
Right.
where we didn't start with that many, or we did a great job according to, the rule that we should be procreating as a species. We're doing a hell of a job. Not as good as chickens. They're better than us. There's 25 billion chickens in the world.
But we take up more space than they do and eat more calories every day. And
yeah,
I know
we do.
We're the only large mammal to ever have this 8 billion. There's never been another large mammal that's had 8 billion. No species of our size that takes up this our amount of space and our amount of calorie. Yeah, I did the math of how many chickens, if every human being on the planet ate one chicken a day, that's about 2,000 calories. How many and like you say, there's a lot of chickens because they got to feed us,
Yeah, well, the cattle, there's 7 billion cows out there. There's 5 billion goats, 5 billion sheep. I think there's 4 billion horses. I mean, pretty successful species.
Yeah.
The only problem is you get just a hair top heavy when you're, you don't have the biodiversity.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, look at scientists. According to scientists, there's been several extinction events over the years, and again, we're not a cosmic event. We're not a cosmic event. We'd like to believe that, but we're just a tiny little blip on this. Yeah, I mean,
I guess you read or saw some of the Webb telescope stuff about the billions of galaxies they're discovering. It is mind-boggling. I wonder, when it comes to death, do you share my opinion that being a hunter and being actively engaged in the death of animals has made you more accepting of your own mortality?
Of course. Nobody knows more about life and death than hunters, field to table livers, hunter gatherers, because it's, like I said earlier, life begets death begets life begets death. You can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
And so to try and deny it, how can a hunter deny it? You can't. It's going to happen, and I think your ability to withstand the demands of growing older is predicated on your ability to understand that it's part of life too. So yes, I think we absolutely understand it better. Then my wife Louise, I mean, she was diagnosed 1.5 years ago now. A horrible. They gave her 3 months to live, and with chemo 6 to 9 months, and now it's 1.5 years, and to watch her struggle with, I don't want to say fight, because it's not fighting, but it certainly is a struggle.
Yeah.
And with such dignity and elegance and a spirituality, I can only aspire to that strength and courage that she has. And I think as hunters, we have a better understanding going into this final phase of our existence, and acceptance. It is what it is. Why you can lay down and throw a tantrum and kick your legs up and scream, but it's not going to stop anything. It is what it is. And what a beautiful look today. It's a beautiful day. Today is a beautiful day. I don't care if it's raining and blowing outside and nasty cold. It's a beautiful day. And as long as we keep that in perspective, that we're not guaranteed any number of days, it's today is beautiful. Live day to day and do your best. Do something good each day. Accomplish something each day. It's, even if it's walking outside and smelling the fresh air, it's a beautiful day. And that's how I look at this, growing older. And that's why you'll see on my social media, it is what it is. If I see one thing a day that, even my burnt yam fries the other day, that's funny. That's funny. I mean, what a clown. I didn't know how to cook yam fries. And besides the fact I forgot, and I didn't know how to work the dinger donger thing on the timer. I mean, it's funny. And that, so it brings a smile, to my face and Louise, and her pointing at me, and couching it, and guess who burnt the yam fries, and have Louise's picture or finger pointing at me. It's just funny. And
she even made you go grocery shopping last week. It looked like,
never. It's funny. Today she's grocery shopping.
Okay.
Apparently I didn't do that great a job last week. A
lot of snack food, it looked like. Yeah,
it was 9 bags of chips and a rubber chicken, a pre-cooked chicken. It's like, what? But I mean, I just was so excited. I never really do a whole bunch of grocery shopping. So to walk in there and see all this food, it was almost impossible for me not to come up with 5 carts full of everything that I just love to eat. So it's but again, that's funny. And
it is funny.
You just have to, feeling crappy physically, who cares? It's still, it's each day is beautiful and a wondrous thing. We should never take each day for granted.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that about you, and I appreciate it about the hunting. Yeah, I think it's really brought me in touch. If there's one thing spiritually that hunting has added to my life, it has put me in touch with my own mortality, which has led me to appreciate the days I have. I wonder about one other thing, risk. You talk about the propagation of our species, which I think is an evolutionary, benefit. Like, of course, and one of the things we try to do so that our species propagates is we eliminate risk from our lives. So our lives become safer and safer, and we have seatbelts and airbags, and our food is, our food is all checked by the government to make sure it doesn't have E. coli in it and stuff like that. But you're taking people out into a pretty risky situation, stuff can go sideways, what you're doing. And I'm sure as a guide and outfitter, you try to mitigate those risks. But nevertheless, I'm sure you have people sign waivers, and the waivers say where we're going, there's grizzlies and there's fast flowing water, and stuff can go sideways. So I wonder if you think there's something also ancestral and human about, in the midst of all this luxury and safety that we have in the modern world, of purposefully putting yourself into a situation that has some risk.
I think there's huge benefits to your self. I mean, your self-reliance, the ability to provide for yourself, to look after yourself. That builds confidence in yourself, self-confidence. Even your body image. I see so many youngsters nowadays that feel horrible. They don't even know what they are. I think it would do many people a lot of good to go out there and challenge themselves, take a risk. And yes, the problem with a risk is there's downsides. That's why it's called risk. But to try and regulate risk out of all of our lives, I mean, I get it. People want, they want to feel safer, and yes, we do that. But in the long run, I think it does a disservice to our species. I think that Darwin's survival of the fittest is a real thing. Now, scientists will probably roll their eyeballs and go, "That was Victorian era. We're beyond that now." But I know obviously met a lot of people in my life. Some of the strongest people I know are the ones that are not afraid of taking that next step, not afraid of challenging themselves. And taking risk, I don't look at it as taking risk. I'm not a risk taker. My risk tolerance is not high. My rules for every one of my guides are out there today. And I'll guarantee you, if you phoned them up and said, or got them on the Sato phone and said, what are the 5 rules? Every single one of them could answer right now. And that's safety, 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 and safety. So there's my level of risk tolerance. I don't seek risk out. I do seek challenges. I want to challenge myself. I want to try something new. I want to, when to me, risk is introduced when there's the possibility of failure. So that's to me what is the most important is you have to do things or I have to do things that introduce the possibility of failure in your life and in whatever challenge you're facing. And without that, I mean, you hear the mountaineers talk about it, they're never so alive as when they're on the mountain facing something that could take their life.
Yeah.
They're never so alive at that moment. And I try and avoid that. That's why I don't climb 8,000-meter peaks, although they, like a moth to a flame, they draw me. I mean, I can probably name most of them, 8,000-meter peaks. There's 14 of them in the world. Because I would probably die. The challenges, attaining the goal is more important than the getting down. It was Ed Viesturs, the first North American to climb all 14 8,000-meter peaks without oxygen. He said, getting to the top is optional. Getting back down is mandatory. And for me, the attaining the goal is more important. So I try not to challenge myself to attain goals that the option, if you fail, is to die. That's where the risk comes in. And failure, yes, but then choose challenges where you can live with the risk, literally live with the risk, because if you die from the risk, what was the point?
Right.
So yeah, we go out there, but I think it builds a stronger person, and that's why we do it, to challenge ourselves and face those challenges and meet those challenges.
I want to turn to a couple of your other projects, but before I do that, I just would love to hear, what is it you love watching your shows and seeing the Yukon? It looks incredible. I mean, it looks like one of the last really untouched places on the planet. And I just wonder if you can sum up, like, what is it that draws you like a magnet to that area of the planet?
The Yukon up in Canada is the last remote, pure wilderness left in this world. Siberia, and all through Siberia, it's Grand Central Station compared to the Yukon. I mean, there's 40,000 people live in the entire Yukon. It's the size of Texas and Montana combined, from what I understand.
Yeah.
And it's not flat. It's you flatten that out, it's even larger. Our outfitting territory up the Rogue River outfitting territory, that's mine, has been for over 20 years. It's over 7.5 million acres, so over 12,000 square miles. And there's not a single road in there. There's not any houses, just our cabins on lakes. It is so pure. You can drive or fly in an airplane, because it's only access for, well, not the only access. You could take a few months and maybe get in there by horse, but you can fly for an hour and a half and never reach the boundary of our territory.
Wow.
So to me, to get away from our civilization, our world, even though we're still pretty civilized out there, we fly in with airplanes, for goodness sakes. We have satellite telephones and inReaches. We have boats and motors and Argos. I mean, it's not like we're trying to walk out there just in a bear hide and survive, with an atlatl or a spear.
Yeah.
So I'm not. Don't get me wrong. I love where we are at this time in this age, technologically, but the Yukon is a very special place. And I've said before that you will find yourself there or you will lose yourself there.
Interesting.
Because we've had many people that get out there and it's just too overwhelming. They need to have the bright lights in the city and people and the self-reliance scares the heck out of them. So they quit. They call the airplane, get me out of here. I mean, they lost themselves there. But there's others that find themselves. And once you're hooked in the Yukon or on the Yukon or by the Yukon, you're not getting off that hook. It's not barbless. You will go back and back and back. It is truly the most beautiful place that I've ever been. At least I caveat that. The last week in August, first 2 weeks in September, beautiful. Spring is just, I mean, you're literally seeing the end of spring. You're seeing the whole summer. You're seeing fall. Winter's just 50 miles up north coming your way.
Right.
So, but I mean, there's beauty even in winter up there in the darkness. But I love it. The Yukon is what you see. We're not jazzing that up. That's just how beautiful it is. You can't describe it until you're up there and just feel the purity of that wild land that is the Yukon.
I would love to get up there sometime. It looks incredible. Tell me about your museum.
Well, we're actually in the edit suite here in the museum. It's one of the rooms. It's an old school, it was built in 1961, decommissioned in the year 2000, so almost 40 years. Our kids, Brandlin and Eva, both went to the school. It was grade 1 to grade 6, a public school. It's about 17,000 square feet. The community, the local town council wanted it torn down and 10 houses built. And I mean, it was built in 1961. I mean, it was built to the state-of-the-art building codes of the time. So it made no sense to me. They wanted the tax base, and so we bought it out of bankruptcy. Actually, it took 15 years to get it out of the government, and then but they left it in public zoning. So we had what is that? A immovable object meets an irresistible force. Moment when I went into them and said, I want commercial zoning here, and they said, no, you got to tear it down 10 houses. We'll give you residential zoning, but that's it. So we had a huge battle. I mean, I've dealt with bureaucracies all around the world.
Sure.
In my travel, these guys are amateurs. They may think that they're not apex predators like some of the bureaucracies around the world. They're getting there. Bureaucracy nowadays is predatory. But we bought it in 2015, opened the doors in 2019 in the fall, and all I did was just say, if someone knocks on the door to find out what's going on in here, let them in. We put sandwich boards on the local roads here 6 months later, and then just about 2.5 years ago, put a billboard out in the highway. I want to keep it donation only. I grew up in a trailer park, so could not have afforded to come into a museum like this if it was $1 cover charge. But if it was donation, I could have brought in a pretty rock, a grasshopper. I would have donated something to it. We call it the Hand of Man Museum of Natural History, Cultural Arts, and Conservation. Conservation being the educational component. The other side of it being educational as well, but entertaining, beyond just educating. I think a lot of the modern museums, the curators have forgotten that it's entertainment first and education comes as a byproduct. If you bore people to death with 5 things in a big giant room with spotlights and you got to stand 40 yards back and read a billboard with tiny writing all the way through it, that's not entertainment. It's check my pulse, am I alive after 5 minutes. And this museum, we get classrooms through it at least twice a week. Last week we had 4 classrooms plus an extended care home facility brought all their tenants, and the kids love it. It's amazing. It's state of the art on the curation. So it's iPads with tiny little numbers. It's like an Easter egg hunt. If the kids want to see something they're interested, touch the number on the iPad, they get a 2 to 3 minute video explanation of what it is, but with moving video, not just a sign to read. As cute as can be, the kids all bring their parents back on the weekend, and the parents are in shock. They walk in as our children want to see a museum on the weekend. They want to bring us to a museum, and then they walk in and see why.
That's cool.
It's a pretty fascinating place. I started when I was 10 years old. I envisioned this museum with the contents. Everything that's in here, I envisioned when I was, you couldn't tell you it was exactly this arrowhead, but there was going to be arrowheads. Couldn't tell you it was going to be this dinosaur skeleton or this woolly mammoth skeleton, but it was going to be Ice Age animals and dinosaur skeletons and artifacts and clothing and masks and objects from all around the world, folk art. So I just had to figure out how to pay for it. And that's what I spent the rest of my life doing. That's what I've spent my life doing.
Wow.
And what I say is, it's hard to describe it because it's the number one word that people, when they leave, to describe it is overwhelming, because there's so much in here to see and so varied and diverse, because the world's a big place and the wildlife's amazing. And when you go back in time and start bringing, like, there's a full woolly mammoth skeleton in here, a full woolly rhino, skull for sure, but there's also a skeleton that was supposed to be a woolly rhino. But I had Dr. Stefano Piccini from Italy, one of the most famous paleontologists and geologists. He's a doctor. He came through and said, no, that's not a woolly rhino skeleton. He came all the way from Italy.
Wow.
He said, it's some other species that he's never seen. So that's super cool.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't know that, but I'm not a doctor of paleontology and geology. But this museum is, it's one of the top tourist attractions now in Vancouver Island. It's north of Victoria, an hour south of Nanaimo, so the ferries come below and above. And we had over 26,000 visitors last year.
That's awesome.
And this year we're on it looks like a trajectory to be over 30,000. And I suspect it'll top out somewhere around the 40,000 mark, because there's no advertising still. There's many local people don't know about it. It's word of mouth. Everything is word of mouth. If they love it, JP can sell out. If you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
And that's
good for you, man. That's amazing. What a legacy.
Well, the legacy part is we're donating it all to a foundation.
That's awesome.
The land, the building, the contents. And Louise's and my plan is to actually sell our ranch in Saskatchewan and use those proceeds for an endowment, so that expenses will be paid for 40 years. So our great-great-grandchildren and everybody's great-great-grandchildren can come in and see these things that the government-funded museums. This is all private. This is all us doing it out of our pockets. The government-funded museums, they'll be around. There's no doubt, but they don't display these things. We don't have to be politically correct here. To me, a museum
you're being honest. You can be honest.
It's the truth. And if people can't handle that, that's not really my problem.
Right.
Our museum down here, Royal BC Museum in Victoria, they're decolonizing. So anything to do with people Captain Cook's, a replica of his ship, and where you could walk and see how tiny the ship was that he first discovered, landed, in the 1700s here on the coast. It's all been removed. The little, Victorian village where you could see an old pharmacy and a jailhouse and the sheriff's office and the clothier, everything, that's all gone. They took it all out because it's us, and they're sanitizing history. They're rewriting it, and the museum should, in my opinion, should never do that. A museum is a museum. It teaches what happened in the past, so you can learn to avoid problems in the future. But when you sanitize and say that never happened, you're just doomed to repeat it.
And I'm guessing your museum is, you I'm sure pay homage to Aboriginal peoples and Native peoples of North America.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Not just North America. We have the First Nations come through here often. The other day, I had two elders sat in the one room that's dedicated to First Nations Northwest Coast.
Hmm.
And, you know, they were they were so thankful that
Hmm.
we were presenting this in a respectful way. Their art forms. The you know, it's white people down in ivory towers that are determining that you know, they don't want this seen, the First Nations. That's colonial. To me, they're trying not to be, and they're doing just the opposite. They know better. No, we don't know better. They know better. You know, it's theirs. It's theirs to, you know, show the world and to take pride in. But again, who am I? You know, I'm not academic.
Yeah, I mean, basically, you've put your money where your mouth is. I mean, you've just done it yourself. So,
and said this is what people want to see.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's still people you'll never satisfy. 1 in 1,000. We keep a track, but they're
what are you going to do?
You can't do anything.
Well, if you're ready, if you really are prepared to take some criticism, we should talk about your novel, because people have opinions about fiction, and I don't want Jerry to get mad at me for holding you too long, but I'll just say one of the things that I did during COVID, after writing 12 nonfiction books, I started writing fiction. And Jim, it kicked my ass. It's been the hardest professional thing I've ever done in my life. And I know you've finished a novel. It's coming out later this year. Did it kick your ass?
No, you know, no, I wouldn't say that, because I've been working on this. I wrote the first lines of this novel in 1996. So I've been writing this novel in my head for more than 25 years. Boy, is it almost 30 years? Yeah, almost 30 years. So I could have written the first 100 pages watching television. It was, I mean, and if I have a talent, if I was born with a talent, it's writing. I've written 1,000 articles for magazines, and I always told stories in those articles. I didn't do how-to, or very few how-to articles. It was all storytelling. So I've honed the craft, and I mean, I wrote another novel back in 1993 that it was called The Lordly, and you know, it's good, but it almost got published back then, because I was trying to decide which direction I want to go with my career. But now I read it, and I pulled it back. I actually pulled it back. It got in the top 10 out of 2,000 to be. They published 3 of them for Doubleday Canada, which isn't the biggest. You know, it's a smaller publisher, but at least in, you know, for the Canadian side. And I just held it and said, no, someday I'll revisit that, but it's not the novel I really want to write. So I spent, you know, every time I was sitting on a mountain glassing, every time I was, you know, in the Ethiopian bamboo rainforest and bye-bye, I was watching and thinking about my novel. Every time I sat in a customs office waiting for export permits, I was thinking about my novel. And it was time. It was 2016. I determined in 2019, October, Mozambique was my last international trip, because I had to sit down and write this novel. I was ready. So I started writing in November of 2019, and then COVID hit 2 months later. And what are you going to do anyway? I didn't really have anything pulling me this way or that way. And it was a calling. I had to get this out of my head. It was making me nuts. It was taking too much hard drive space. So I sat down and wrote it. And then it's amazing how difficult it is to get anyone to read it. You can get friends to read it, but it doesn't mean anything. But to get it, you know, no publisher is going to take it unless you have an agent. You know, my agent, Esther Fedorkowicz, gets 1,000 unsolicited manuscripts a month. You know, there's 1.8 million books published every year.
I know, too.
In North
and
America.
People are reading less every year too.
And on top of everything.
I know.
So the competition is stiff, and that's the ones that get published. The ones that get written are a factor of probably 20 times higher than that. So you know, I finally got she got one of her readers to read it, and then, of course it has to go through the next reader, and she called me and said, or didn't call, she of course had her people call or email and said, let's do a Zoom call. And her first, it was pretty interesting. And I'm floating off here, but she was and she's a beautiful young lady and just powerful in that industry. And she kind of looking at me, and she had a piece of paper, and she said, I haven't read it yet. She said, but I gotta ask you, did you write this? And I said, well, yeah, of course I wrote it. She said, no ghostwriter, this is you. I said, yeah. And she said, here, and she showed the paper, and she had, I think there was like 10 of her readers had read it, and the consensus was, sign this guy, he's the next great writer.
Wow.
And she said, this is what they say. And she said, they are the most jaded people because they get all this horrible
crap.
writing crap, and they have to wade through it before it ever gets to her.
Yeah.
So she read it and loved it. And then we had to get it published. That's just an agent, and that the big publishers won't even look at something unless it's, especially a fictional work.
Yes, especially. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're Tom Brady and you're doing a Look at Me book, or Cam Haines book, look at that. I mean, amazing. Those ones are a lot easier to get published, but a work of fiction, like you said, is really very difficult. Yeah. And she sent it in, I think, to 10 different publishers of literature. So there's categories, commercial fiction, literature, which is, and it's kind of literature. The book is kind of literature, but all 10 of them, not one of them read it. Not one publisher read it.
Yeah.
They all sent it back and said, this can't be in our category. And the reasoning was because I'm too big of a celebrity to possibly be able to write literature.
Yeah. You wouldn't write literary fiction because you're a TV guy. That's right.
It's impossible. They judged it.
I know.
By the cover and said he's too famous. He's too well known. He can't write literature because literature is the domain of the professor or whatever that's gone through 3 wives, and he's struggling with depression, and he's got it's impossible for this person to be able to, because he's not that person, so he can't. So then we had to put it into commercial fiction, which is a far more difficult category, far more. Because it's the one with the no ceiling.
That's right.
You write Da Vinci Code or Henry Potter or whatever his name is, Harvey Potter. Harry Potter.
Yeah.
What is it? J.K. Rowlings or J.P. Rowlings, whatever she's going to be.
J.K. Rowling, yeah.
She's going to be angry with me right now. But you write that, you can write Patterson. You can write your own ticket for the rest of your life. Hunger Games. Girl with a dragon tattoo. So there's no ceiling on that category, which means everybody wants in that category, which means Simon and Schuster gets 1,000 manuscripts a week.
Yeah.
From
agents.
Yeah, from agents.
Yes.
Who are getting 1,000 a month.
Yes.
So to get anybody to read it, but I have to say, Jack Carr. Have you Terminal List? He had, I think, at one point 3 of his novels on the top 10 in the New York Times bestsellers, including #1. He's had how many #1 novels? I sent it to him. Now I know Jack, right? And that's his pen name, but I'll call him Jack. I was there standing with him when Chris Pratt called him to say he was optioning Terminal List. I mean, it was gosh. Like, wow, party.
Wow.
Yeah. And I've always dreamed about being a novelist since I was 10 years old. This is another thing.
Yeah, me too.
Museum and to be a writer. I started my first novel at 10. I would hide the pages behind a loose brick in our house. And I realized, within 5 or 6 pages that I didn't have a story to tell at 10 years of age. You can have all the desire in the world. But for me,
got to live some life. Yeah.
Yeah, you had to live. And to me, I had to live 65 years essentially before I could, before I felt qualified to write a fictional thriller, to have a story to tell. And this book titled Call Me Hunter, it's my story. And that's exactly what I told them when I sent it to him. It's my story. And it's an autobiographical abstract thriller is how and I don't know, there's no category for that, so they stuck it in the thriller category.
Sure.
Because someone gets killed in the first page. What I say is, look, it's about 80% truth, and the 20% that I'm saying is fiction is the part that would put anybody in jail. So it's but
that's awesome.
Excuse me.
Yeah,
you can Google it, any fact in the book, any person, and they it's not going to be possible for them to deny it. If they are, they're lying.
Yeah,
it's truth. And I mean, I've got James Patterson mentioned in my fictional thriller that he talked about the main character in one of his novels, and he did. It's there, and so
that's cool.
The main character, Hunter, who goes by 3 names, Hunter, Icarus, and Sizu, the Man of Swords. He's kind of an anti-hero. And then there's Nyala, who's the main protagonist, and her sidekick, Luba. And then there's the villain, Zhivago. And it's based in the world of art, the underworld of art. And like I said, I didn't have to make up a whole bunch, ethnocentric folk art and the tribal art from around the world has been my area of expertise, and I've been dealing in art. I had 3 antique stores in Vancouver. Ralph Lauren bought me out, essentially. I furnished all of his Ralph Lauren country stores.
Wow.
When he was trying to get around the Polo franchise. So yeah, it's all truth. It's all truth.
They're in literature these days, some are calling that auto fiction, like autobiography. So auto-fiction. So that's, you may hear that term, that people refer to your novel as that. So, hey, congrats, man. That's incredible. And I'm still working on my novel. So I'm cranking away at it, but
smart people have said the only difference between a writer and someone who isn't a writer is the writer writes.
Yeah, no, so that's right.
You just have to write every single day.
I agree.
And then you keep doing that over time. It took me 6 months to get my first draft done, and I wrote every day 10 hours. I would get up at 4 and be writing till noon, and then I'd go play golf or do something to get my brain out of that world, because I lived in that world.
I've had a very, very similar experience in writing fiction. I fall asleep thinking about it. I wake up thinking about it in that world all the time. So, well, you have to give my apologies to Jerry.
He's standing.
I know. He's standing right there.
He's standing right here. And
hey, buddy.
I see he's got a bunch of contracts.
Jerry, I had to, we could keep talking. This is great discipline to stop talking about fiction writing. I really, really appreciate it. Jim, it's been a total honor having you on the podcast, and, best of luck. I hope you heal up before, the fall hunting season and can be out there climbing mountains and chasing big game again.
Well, I appreciate that, but every day's precious, healed or not. So I'm not too worried. And it was fun. It was a fun podcast because
thanks.
Like you said right at the beginning, it's not the normal questions. So it's good to challenge and make your brain work. So I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks. I appreciate your candor. All right. Take care. Thank you.
You betcha.